Welcome back. First job today is to mount, well, let me show you this bearing. Why just have a piece of metal or plastic when you can have a bearing that rolls round on the end of the follower on the snail cam? Bearings are amazing. I've talked about them before, but they are fabulous. Here's one, and you can see this one isn't sealed, so you can see the balls inside it that run round, the hardened steel balls within the cage. Absolutely incredible. But that's amazing, it's that small. This is even more amazing. Can't even focus on it, I'm going to have to zoom in more. This is the bearing I'm using for the end. Isn't that incredible? 3mm M3 screw through it, and I've just worked out and cut out two incredibly small card washers from metallic card to ensure, one either side, that the screw doesn't bind on it or the surfaces that it's screwed up against, and it's free to turn. So there's ever such a small spacer. It's this lovely metallic card that I use for this actually, and the wedding invites and other bits and pieces. Fabulous stuff. And I've just been experimenting and cutting out a series of these little spacers until I find the one that's just big enough to fit over M3 and just small enough to not bind on the outside of the bearing. And I have. I'm now going to get on and get all this assembled, and then we can test it to see if it works after all this. You would not credit it. There are a range of words that can be used to accurately describe what went on yesterday after I just started fixing this on, but I don't fancy using the bleep command too much, so I won't use them. Needless to say, it was incredibly frustrating. Not unsuccessful, but I can see why this has taken 4 years. You know, having measured accurately all these pieces and everything else, got it all set up, I then come to put it together and find that things don't in fact line up. The follower for the snail cam doesn't line up, etc, etc. There are binding teeth on this, which reminds me I must adjust the drawing. The spindle here I suddenly discover, because these spindles are all 3D printed and they turn beautifully on the stainless steel rivets, but drilling a hole, being very clever, because I originally, hang on, where's the original one gone? Here we are, which reminds me I have to cut something else out. Very cleverly, I thought to myself, printed a grub screw, threaded hole for a grub screw, so that because this was quite long, I could have the rivets going through the back here, poking through, fix that on. But as it turned out, especially because the chain is pulling quite a long way from the actual centre of gravity, if you like, it's trying to pull it down in effect, it was really binding really badly. And the whole idea of this and the whole reason it is so utterly complicated and frustrating is it all has to work under gravity. The only motive power comes from the snail cam slowly turning. Everything else is gravity, so you can't force the issue, so everything's got to be really low friction. So despite putting a nice big heavy lead weight on this, no can do. It wasn't pulling the arm back to 0. It didn't have enough force to work the AM/PM in the what a palaver. So I've had to go, and the noise in the background is the next version of this, because there's another version, and there's another version. After much umming and ahhing, I decided to, because as I say, the friction is so little friction between PLA plastic and the rivets, I'm actually going to have the rivet in here, and after further much umming and ahhing, I've worked out I can just, you can glue in the gem at the end after you've assembled it. And after even further umming and ahhing, I don't even know whether you can see this, because remember with this one I had a cunning slot so you could poke the chain and drop glue in, but obviously that's not possible if you've got a rivet going right through the middle. So there we are, look at that. A lovely 2mm hole offset, so you can drop the chain in, and there's the eel on the inside, so you can get the rivet in, but obviously sizes and everything else. So I've spent this morning designing yet another version, because it gets to the stage when you're fiddling around with 3D Builder, creating complicated shapes and changing them and editing them and filling in holes and making new holes. and threads, etc., etc., that it can get really corrupted, I suppose. The data gets corrupted in some way, and then you try and subtract something and it just will not do it, and you go and do something else, come back, take the dog for a walk, whatever, and it's still sitting there calculating. Frustrating? Nah. So I went ahead and rebuilt it from scratch using the shapes, and then I could subtract everything. In the end, once I decided what the inside was going to be like to allow for clearance for the rivets and things and gem, I've made something, the shape of the inside hole, and then just subtracted that in one go from the solid bit, which worked a treat. So watch this space. I am very pleased with that, I have to say. I left it running. I didn't take the battery out of the clock overnight, and despite not having the additional weight pulling this forward of that spindle with a lead weight, it managed to go from AM to PM, which I'm absolutely thrilled about. Didn't overjump or anything else, and I'm also thrilled because there's a lot of talking here. If you remember, the other issue I had was, like I was saying, this lever not lining up, the follower with the cam, and I thumbed and on about different clock movements with longer shafts. Just in the end came to me in a blinding flash, I think it was that. Anyway, have another piece of 2mm acrylic cut to the right side hill stuck on the back of the cam, then you can bring the whole cam forward by 2mm, and then it works perfectly. It's then got space at the back for screws, it's got clearance around it, which is so much nicer. Well, I'm so pleased with it though. It's just a thing of beauty. I love all the different angles, and wherever you look there's things going on, you know, there's all the different layers and little cubby holes and twinkly things and funny shaped pieces. Very satisfying. I was just looking for some weights. I don't really want a lump of lead hanging there, especially as it's the work of the devil these days, even though when I was growing up all our drinking water came through lead pipes. It's never done me any. And I was looking and found, as I knew I would, because when you do Googling searches, especially with images switched on, you just find so many lovely things. And I've just found lovely brass fishing weights, 22mm by 8mm, lovely shape, which will, I think, hang beautifully just down here. Version 4 or 5, I think. It just shows you, well, at least it shows me how daft I am when I think, oh no, I've got it all sorted out, let's print the final one. Ho ho. While I'm waiting for something or other, the last thing that I need to sort out for this, I was just painting, I've decided to spray paint the new cam just so it looks nice, is the second hand. Now what I was doing, it was to cut out an incredibly fine thing on the laser cutter from 10mm acrylic with an incredibly fine hole in it that pushed on to the second hand thing that sticks out, the proing. But now I've moved this further out to make more room for everything, and also the AM/PM to get that working, this is no longer long enough. What I thought I'd do is to make 3D print this rather unpleasant looking object. It's meant to be 2mm diameter with a 0.5mm hole in it, 15mm long. As you can see, didn't quite go to plan. I know that's asking an awful lot of a 3D printer, and it is pretty amazing that that's vertical. And now it's gone. And here we have it. I proudly present version 4. It's lovely. Lots of new features, sort of. I was saying, it's all made out of very few bits now, just one-offs. One lot of holes and everything. The hole in the middle was 3.7 or 8mm printed, and I just drilled it out to 4 to make sure it's absolutely spot on for the rivets. One thing I was having a problem with, which I hopefully have solved, is look, ooh, and it's even conical inside, it gets wider, so that there shouldn't be any, let's try it and see, because it wasn't going in before. Oh, look at that now. Oh, spinny things. Excellent, with enough sticking out the back to fix into the clock's back, but equally, if you line that up, you can see how much of that now is supporting. this, so it's going to stop it tending to do that. Now, last thing to check before I go ahead and cut another gear and spray it, if I can actually pick it up. Let's try a gem. Is that? Right, this isn't going to work, is it? Because the camera's on. Push a gem into the rebate. Oh! Now, I'm also very happy with that. I made that rebate a little bit deeper because you could still see the silver plating on the back of the gem. That's just pushed in beautifully. Testing, testing, 1, 2, 3, and it's still in there. Which means that you can assemble it or get it all together and then either just push it in and leave it with friction or put a little dab of super glue. And then, dear friends, to remove it should you want to, you can shove it like that. I did that yesterday and fired a couple across the room, so be a little bit careful. Fabulous. I'll go ahead and cut out the 5mm replacement gear. Beep, 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 beep. And glue the chain in and spray it and other stuff. I forgot to say, I did screw the base on really nicely. It's come out. You cannot beat the juxtaposition, as very few people say in the trade, of having wood, stained wood, against brass and metal and a little bit of what looked like glass and white engraving. Oh, it's just a joy. While I've been waiting for the paint to dry, I've been sorting out meters, particularly or specifically these beautiful little meters. Analog, moving coil, fabulous, not a digit in sight, well other than my own. They're 45 millimeters roughly, the hole size to mount them behind or in front of. You could put them behind and then they'll be round, which is very steampunk orientated. And as I mentioned, I think briefly in the past, these are set to measure 0 to 300 volts AC, I think. But nice customer who wants to build a display to analyse British or UK electricity usage and where it's coming from, where it's being sourced. Wants 6 of these, each with a specific gauge legend, which I've just been working on, which I've got all 6 done now. So that's terribly the next thing for me to do, because he's going to assemble them, I'm just going to engrave them for him, is to work out the circuit so that these will work off a pulse width modulated output from a 5-volt Arduino, which may sound impossible considering that's 0 to 300 volts, or indeed the larger ones which I use for the barometric pressure readings on things like the climatic revelator. It's 0 to 50 volts. 10 times too much electrometry than the Arduino can supply. But no, dear friends, because inside the actual moving coil meter takes very little electricity in effect, very little voltage or current or whatever. So that's very interesting. I have wondered, and do let me know in the comments, if it would be worth starting to offer these, because I could buy them in bulk possibly, spray them up with brass, and then do the electronic conversion myself, so that you could just buy a gauge ready to connect to your steampunk machine via an Arduino, and therefore it could read absolutely anything that your heart could desire or your imagination could dream of. Let me know in the comments. You know, it'd be possible, I suppose, I could even do the design, or you could send me a design so I can engrave it, or you could print it out on your printer and stick it onto the metal. Lots of possibilities. Interested to hear what you think. Thank you kindly. The wonderful blue tack does it again. Trying to help put this chain through that hole with it vertical so it hangs down inside, so I can put a blob of glue on it. Wrapping it around, filling a bit all over the place. No chance. A little blob of blue tack on the outside. Perfect. Also I thought, well, perhaps I could reuse this chain off the original one. A bit of destruction testing later. That is really well stuck in there. That's not coming out for no one, I tells you. Brilliant. Right, let that set. Take the dog for a walk. You never know. I might actually finally get this together and then test it. I don't know whether I can stand the tension. Would you Adam and Eve it. Dogs walked, etc, etc. Look, I've put the new thing back on. The chain was glued in brilliantly. I'll just use a bit of blue tack there, just while I adjust the hand. I've just turned the snail cam all the way round, so it's just dropped back down to 0 in effect, or 1. And that means that all the gears are taking up slack. That means I can point that to 1, and then it should go all the way over, round to here, before returning. Now, second hands, dear friends. As you know, I'd managed to print some horrible little thing that had fallen on the carpet of invisibility, and originally having some cut out 10mm thick laser cut thing, which was all a bit wonky. My newfound, I don't really know what to call it, newfound something. Well, desperation, let's call it desperation, to get this clock finished after 4 years and 3-4 days. I suddenly thought, clock movements, they come with hands usually, so I've got these hands. I also remembered this original one. As you can see, I used the hand, the second hand that came with the clock movement, painted it black, and it looked really nice, and several people looked at it and said, oh, I love that hand. So I managed to find, thankfully, the end. And what I'm going to do now, in front of your very eyes for your delectation, is use that new black oil paint marker thing to put some paint on. Ooh, misses. I can see something happening. Ah, you only have to do this once, because I remember with the silver one, oh look, it's happening. Ooh, ooh. Right, now I'm going to endeavour not to paint the middle brass bit, because I don't want that painted. And as always, the camera is on, so it's all going to go wrong. Camera on, everything wrong. Wow. I don't think I managed to get any. That just covers so beautifully. I'm so pleased with that. It's as if I had paint in a tube. And then of course, another bit of blue tack to hold it down while it dries. 1001 uses around the home and garden. Right, I'll let that dry and then get that put on there. Then, theoretically, dear friends, it is finished and we can test it. Thanks very much for watching. I forgot to say it when I was videoing this video, so it's a couple of days later, but it is working almost. Thanks again, and please remember to click subscribe and like if you've liked it. Hope to see you next time.